Cool. So we are live for the fourth episode. I never thought I'd even get to two, let alone three. And now I'm up to four of these things of redefining advertising. Just talking to Jeff before getting on, like it's a very weird, interesting time in the world of advertising and marketing in general, across the board, not just TV, but also social media, digital platforms. The world seems to be like redefining itself every single day. And I think it's taking the advertising and marketing world with it. And so some challenges that we're faced with every single day as marketers and advertisers are following along with, with paid media and our opportunities to actually reach our consumers and the people that really want to engage with our products and the things that we're trying to sell. So it's a really interesting time to speak with Jeff, not just because of all of the things socially that's going on in our world, but also some of the opportunities that may actually be out there for a lot of small businesses in the current climate that maybe people aren't aware of. And I know sometimes paid media and people that are not used to paid media or understand what it is, it can be a bit daunting and kind of confusing to understand. But I do think that they're very simplistic things that a lot of people can do, a lot of small brands could do, a lot of small businesses could do to actually reach a wider audience. So Jeff, I'm super happy to have you on. We've known each other for over 5 years now, having worked at Vayner together. And I think we had a great collaboration when we were there, and there was a lot of stuff I learned from you in the process. And I don't think I would be where I am today as a content creator if I didn't also understand the valuable, things that paid media brings to the content that I create. So I think we've had a great relationship, and I'd love for you to introduce yourself, kind of tell everybody who you are, what you're currently doing, and then we can kind of get into some of the things I want to talk about around the benefits and the power of paid media in today's marketplace.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. Jeff Nicholson. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Tracer. Been in the advertising space for nearly 15 years, and so happy to be here.
Cool. Can you just tell me a little bit about what Tracer is? Because I know it's not really a traditional paid media team, but you do a lot of stuff across, paid media and also efficiencies around media spends for brands and for businesses.
Yeah, simply put, it's a data processing platform. So we join disparate data sets. So when marketers or really anyone has a business question around, using multiple data sources to answer, what is my return on investment? What is the most effective piece of creative? Whatever the question may be, we try to process the disparate data sets in order to answer those questions.
Cool. So let's get into what is paid media, because I know a lot of people come from traditional advertising and marketing, having to do with television. Prior to 5 years ago, I think everybody had a different understanding of what a paid media team would do when it comes to placing content on television. So what is paid media as it stands today in the current marketplace on digital platforms like Facebook and Instagram and Twitter?
Yeah. So, paid media is just a paid placement, right? So it is paying for inventory, right? And it can be really any channel, but typically the term is used in digital, and purchasing an advertising unit in any place, whether it's a banner ad or in news feed, whatever it may be, but it's just purchasing that inventory.
And so when it comes to dealing with brands specifically, do you advise, come up with a strategy of how they should place the media, where they kind of target the media spend, or are you just a facilitator for whatever the brand is asking, for the placement?
Yeah, I think it depends. For Tracer, we just process the data, so we're agnostic. But in general, marketing terms, I think it depends on who you are in the value chain. So agencies typically will place media and give a strategy on top. So what's in the best interest of the client's KPIs, typically revenue or some type of growth metric. So you really have to identify for each client what are they trying to achieve, and then reverse engineer, how you do that. Right. So if it's, a young audience, you might, let's say, trend towards Snapchat. If it's a geographic specific opportunity, and maybe you're leveraging Google Maps and really focusing on directory listings. So it can be any tactic.
So let's talk about some misconceptions of paid media, because I think there are some people out there that think paid media solves all, as long as you have a good, healthy paid media spend, you can actually run a successful campaign. And I don't necessarily know if that's actually true. So can you just talk a little bit about some of the things that people may not really, have a firm understanding of, how paid media can effectively run something, maybe how paid media could be something that, it's not actually a one-stop solve for all brand problems or business problems.
No, running bad commercials or advertising is not going to fix your business any more than having a bad product. So I'd say the only magic pill is having an amazing product that everyone has to have, regardless of your competition. But outside of that, paid media is just one of the levers that you need to pull to be successful. So super simple example is advertising to an audience that you're not targeting correctly, right? So maybe it's a t-shirt for a gentleman, and you happen to use an inventory source that's not identifying gender correctly. Well, you're wasting your money. So although you're buying a placement, you're speaking to the wrong audience. That's going to be a problem. Or if you're not relating on the right feature, if you're selling a car. So you really need, distribution, the content, the timing, the nuance of kind of the message to all fit correctly in kind of the box that you purchase.
Also, something that's really interesting is like there's a lot of DIY people doing paid media now. Facebook and Instagram, I think it almost encourages people to kind of run their own paid media spends on some of the content they actually produce. Can you talk to me about like some of the benefits or some things that you've seen where that's actually worked, and maybe give me an example where maybe that's just not worked and has actually been a detriment to spending money without really having any type of return on investment?
Yeah, I mean, I think the classic example I always use is search advertising. So if you're on Google and you type in, I need to buy car insurance, and you're, progressive, and you're purchasing that keyword, you're likely going to get a return on your investment. That is someone who is actively in the market, who has a great deal of intent based on the query they typed into the search engine. And as a brand, you want to be there to capture that value, and establish that relationship and attain that customer. But at the same front, if you are potentially advertising again where it's a new product and you're using a very short form, you may not be able to educate the consumer on what the product is. What if they don't understand the new technology? Or, if you think about Nintendo coming back years ago, or Atari, well, you're not going to run a 3-second ad and go, hey, what's this potentially, if they didn't really capture what you're trying to achieve with the message.
Right.
You really have to understand, two different opportunities, launching a new product, great level of intent and a signal. How do you leverage those things depending on who you are and what you can purchase?
So I was actually talking to a client last week, and she had already hired a team to run some of her paid media that she was doing. She's kind of getting back into the game. For a product that she had, launched maybe 4 or 5 years ago. She's kind of reinvented it and is now relaunching it. And she shared with me her paid media strategy, and she was going heavily on Facebook ads. And I questioned why she wasn't thinking about Google search, because when you think about people who are looking for something, like you just said, when somebody types in, insurance, there's an intent there that already has like a buy kind of hooked on the end of that intent, right? When you're reaching out to somebody cold on Facebook, even if it's like, I think it was a perfume type thing. So I was like, well, why aren't people are looking for this specific type of perfume? It may be challenging to, like you said, run some ads on Facebook and see any type of return on investment, because it's such a niche thing that you're doing. But every day people are searching for this specific type of perfume. I was confused as to why she wasn't running Google ads. Can you talk about maybe some of the strengths of Google ads when it comes to an audience that's hyper-focused on your product, and why maybe that's a better solution than Facebook? Because I think everybody just jumps to Facebook as being like the solution for all of their advertising problems.
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, both platforms work. I mean, I will openly tell you that both platforms can be wildly successful, and they're two of the most dominant advertising platforms on the planet. Classically, everything was built off of Google,
right,
from an origin perspective. But if you think about the simple aspect of intent, right, and the signal that they're capturing on Google, they stand for discovery. And then the quality of the discovery and the intent of the user to purchase can be dictated on what they type in and then the query that they type in, right? So again, if we're going to use insurance, I want to buy insurance right now is a very strong signal, versus someone might type in compare Geico versus Progressive. Right. So now you're looking at consideration set. They're, not at the same level of potential intent, but both extremely high. Versus if you're on Facebook, most people are obviously digesting their news feed in some capacity, whether it's Insta stories, whether it's the classical news feed. They're just discovering content. Right. And so you're injecting yourself into that experience, but they haven't shown the level of intent of, I want to buy insurance right now. So if Geico is going to present an opportunity in the news feed, they're doing that to inject themselves, as opposed to meeting the customer where they're saying, I want this right now. And that's just a huge difference in conversion rate, which obviously can potentially dictate a significant, return on investment or margin.
Right. And talk to me a little bit about like that conversion rate, because the one thing that's very interesting for me from a content creative perspective and from somebody that's interested in advertising is that, traditionally advertising is about disruption, right? We're disrupting somebody's experience of whatever they're doing, whether that be a newsprint, a TV show, their feed. Like when you're advertising to somebody and putting paid media behind it, how important is it for your content and for your paid media strategy to make sure that you're aligning with that person's, lack of disruption? So you're not as you said, injecting yourself in somebody's everyday routine, but it's kind of like something that they would want to seek out, or something that maybe aligns with where they are in their head philosophically, or product that would actually speak to them.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think no matter what placement you're purchasing, right? So no matter what type of media, you have to understand its context and then match that to what you're delivering. And you have to be comfortable to know that, some channels or contextual opportunities are not going to be relevant to you. So I think that you can waste money very easily in advertising in any case, right? And you need to make sure that you're educated on what you're purchasing, you understand who you're speaking to, you're effectively targeting. All of these elements need to come together. So I think that it really comes down to the nuance of who you are as a client, what are you trying to achieve, and then again, reverse engineering all of the options on the table for your best interest at the time, right? And in some cases that might be leveraging, the explosion of TikTok as a platform because, it's going to be cheaper because there's not as much proven advertising commodity on that platform, right? Versus Google is an established menu item, in the community, and you're looking at insurance where those are mature marketplaces, and they're priced accordingly. You've had years of pricing or kind of competition, so you have to understand risk reward and where you play in the marketplace as well.
Yeah, I think that's really insightful. Like making sure like your products align to basically they age into the right demographic for the platforms that are working well. Like you're not going to run a massive campaign for auto insurance on TikTok. Just probably not going to work.
Yeah, I mean, and again, like you have to understand what product are you selling, right? And obviously they're younger. How do you inject yourself, right? Even thinking about TikTok as a platform, understanding that if you put a classical display ad, let's say, which they wouldn't even allow anyways, but interrupting a typical user experience in which they're watching videos that are really choreographed with great music and a significant feel and kind of vibe to them, and you don't match that, no one's going to, listen to your message or take that on. They're just going to completely dismiss you. So it's just, you need all of the elements, creative, media, tactics, everything to come together.
So how important is it for you to be a part of, when you are running paid media, how important is it for you to be a part of the creative process at the beginning of it, but rather than actually get something that's already been half baked and you have to run an ad for it?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a mutual partnership that you need to have through the whole journey of what you're trying to achieve. So, even thinking about you and I and some of the things we did, when you're discussing an idea, you're already trying to think about where does that idea live? And vice versa, you're trying to think about, hey, do we have the opportunity to target a certain segment of people, and how do I want to speak to them, right? And we're going to match those equations in order for the best outcome for the client. And I think that that's imperative through the whole thing.
Right. So really understanding that core audience and then creating content that actually matches that based on a paid media recommendation of like, this is where we're going to see the best outcome for whatever message you may want to put out there.
Yeah, just having a discussion about it, right? I mean, I think that, nobody has the perfect kind of answer up front, right? There's not one person, right? So you do have to have a discussion around, again, all of those elements and who represents those elements of a great, campaign or strategy and have them come together on what you're trying to achieve.
So one thing that's been super interesting is that, just to kind of get a little bit into where we are currently in the current advertising world, like we've seen so many people from creative advertising agencies be laid off. We've seen the entire advertising world be kind of turned on its head. And one thing that I've been thinking a lot about is how maybe the next step in advertising is like basically coming together a lot of these disciplines to be working collaboratively together. And I know that we did a lot of that stuff working at Vayner, and I think it was kind of way ahead of its time. And what Gary was trying to do and how we're making content as a collaborative unit with creative production, distribution, all kind of working and sitting at the same table. Do you see that as being a massive benefit of having all of these capabilities kind of baked into one agency? And if so, like what are the benefits, and maybe what are some of the pitfalls as these new agencies start to redefine and rebuild themselves once we get through these times that we're currently in? Like, how can they start thinking about maybe it being a much more collaborative effort? Because I think traditionally there's been so much finger pointing of when things go wrong, and ownership of like I did that when things go right, that sometimes that can like really hurt the client at the end of the day. And I think clients are looking for much more cohesive vision and product that they can actually get behind.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's no perfect answer, right? I think if someone had that, they get all the business. But I think there's definitely things to be considered, right? And you know, let's start with the client, right? Again, like if you think about who the client is, if they're a global company who needs, you know, infrastructure, you know, around the globe, there's only going to be a few choices to do that, right? Probably 5 to 10 companies, right? So I think the first thing you have to think about is client size, right? Let's talk small, medium business, for example. You know, you need to consider it. You need a partner, right? You need someone who's going to make you, you know, complementary and also consider all aspects of what you're trying to achieve. And I think you're going to look for someone who, again, to your point, has all of the things in one place, so you can deliver, you know, a great outcome for the client. So I really do think it depends on a lot of variables, but I think it's imperative that everyone's talking in the supply chain for the client's best interest, right? And that's your point. You know, is that maybe 2 companies, 5 companies? I mean, that depends on the situation, but I think the biggest thing is that everyone's aligned on the outcome, and there's measurable results for everybody in kind of how they deliver.
So how do you define success from a media perspective when the actual ask is, you know, we want to see a return on investment? Like, how can you quantify success? And I know there's a lot of different ways that people want to say you're successful based on engagement, based on views, based on whatever. For me, I think bottom line is like, are you selling product for your client? Like, are you actually achieving that? How can you quantify some of those things with paid media and understand maybe how you're running a very successful campaign for them?
Yeah. So again, for an SMB business, I'm going straight revenue and sales, right? Like I want to understand, you know, return on investment by each of the channels that I'm investing in. You know, obviously understand any correlation analysis depending on how I'm selling the product online, offline, etc. But I'm going straight, you know, revenue, profit, like classic business, right? As opposed to you have to get in more nuance. Again, if you think about Geico, right, one of the largest advertisers in insurance, they have to spend so much money. They have a variety of tactics all the way through the funnel because they have both the pain and the luxury to do that. But if you're an SMB business, you're going off revenue, right? I want to see a return on investment. I want my partner to be invested in that number being successful. And I want to measure it on simple, you know, even last click, you know, Google Analytics is one of your best bets, even today.
Right. One thing that's really kind of been interesting for me as I've been working with smaller businesses is that I always ask them what their cost per acquisition is. And they're sometimes blown away by that question because, you know, when they work with other companies, I guess in the past, they've just basically handed them media dollars and they've just gone and spent the money, but they don't really track, you know, like, hey, we can actually get you a client for X amount of dollars. How important is it for small and mid-sized businesses to understand what their cost per client is in order to really run effective paid media? Because I feel like once you have that number, then you can start to like play with the numbers of media spends and just know like, hey, if we spend $5, we're going to get you a client. So you want 10 clients? Good, $50. You know, so I think that's a really important number that people don't really think a lot about. Yeah,
I mean, I think it's essential. I think you have to know it, and you have to at least have an understanding of what the range is, because it will change, right? It will evolve over time as you spend, you know, more money or less, depending on how your market share grows, depending on how the auction place evolves, whether it's on Facebook, Google, but you definitely need to know.
Yeah, and talk to me a little bit about like when you're looking at the numbers that are coming in, like what's numbers are kind of the most valuable for you when you're assessing your campaigns?
I mean, if you use a classic retail example, I'm going to look at return on investment by audience segment or keyword. Right.
What does that look like?
Granularity, and make sure that I have a good grasp on consistency over time, and then invest in what works.
And so when you're kind of approaching that classical model, like how are you recommending the client actually achieve that number? Like, is there like a specific number that they need to be spending against, or is it kind of different depending on the platform that you're using?
Oh yeah, it varies greatly. I mean, it would depend on what you're selling, what platform you're purchasing, how large your budget is. But I think the biggest thing is making sure you understand how you're spending your money, who's spending it on your behalf, and are they aligned with what your KPI is, which should be sales, and making sure that you have very close ties to that measurement around sales to your actual business, and that people are fostering growth for your company.
Let's talk a little bit about like a lot of clients who are new to paid media, or just kind of getting, dipping their toe in the water of paid media. They don't understand there's a learning process that's kind of at the very beginning of every paid media campaign that I've ever been a part of anyway. So there's always a test and learn period where you're kind of trying to figure out your audience and trying to test your audience. How do you communicate to a client when they're investing hundreds of thousands of dollars on a paid media campaign, to really kind of put them at ease, to be like, listen, that first like month or so, you're not going to see what the return that we're actually promising. It's going to take a little bit of time, but actually, if you play the long game, those returns will actually supersede some of the expectations that you kind of set up. So how do you kind of walk a client through the beginning of working with a paid media campaign who's never done it before, is interested to know how it works?
Yeah, I mean, most that are going to be new to paid media are going to be, again, SMB businesses. And I think one of the simple things is showing them tactically how it works from a campaign level. Walk them through how they're building a campaign. Walk them through the query example I showed them, to understand what it would cost in the auction place. Google example, provides actually free estimates on what it costs to bid on keywords. You can show the business owner, hey, this is what it is, the estimate from Google themselves, right? So you have some understanding of the cost of what they're purchasing and why. And then also tell them that there's going to be testing, in order, to your point, to understand what it's going to take to win, right? And that can be as simple as changing landing pages associated with the query. We go back to the insurance example, and maybe, there's a geo query, right? Again, so it says, I want New York car insurance. Well, if you land that person on a page that says New York with a Statue of Liberty on it, they're probably more likely to convert, funny enough. Why? Right. Because there's relevance on the landing page. And so you need to start testing those elements of your conversion funnel in order to be more successful. Because every dollar you spend is important, right? You're trying to retract and gain revenue off of that investment. And so you need to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward.
Yeah. And that gets me to like content, and how important content is around a paid media campaign. I mean, I wasn't even thinking about a simple, like putting a picture of the Statue of Liberty can really convert people, but you're absolutely right. Because if they're looking for something specific, the more specific they are when they land on that page, the more identified they are with that product, and they're probably going to actually convert and buy. Yeah. So how important is content when it comes to paid media, and what's some of the effective things that you've seen that work, kind of similar to the example you explained, where content has actually helped, really kind of push that paid media campaign over the edge?
Yeah, I mean, the classic example I use a lot is from very early in my career, was clothing. So I was running a campaign for Brooks Brothers. And the landing page that we showed for women shopping was outfits as opposed to one product, right? And this is 10 plus years ago. And just the type of content that you present on your landing page, as much as the advertisement that you create up front, is paramount in your success, or the potential for success. And so understanding what content is going to drive the behavior that you'd like. And in the case of an advertisement, maybe you need to wow them where you're buying that context, right? In that platform, maybe it's in newsfeed and you need to stop at a thumb, and a little more aggressive up front, versus in regards to the website, you need to demonstrate what you're selling to them so they can easily purchase your product. So all of the pieces of content in the conversion funnel are very important to the success and failure of an advertising campaign.
How about diversification of content? Meaning, like, how important is it if you are a brand that is trying to reach a wider demographic than just a specific target audience? How important is that content be identifiable to the variety of audience that you're trying to reach?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's again, I think you need to balance and understand what you're selling, who you're selling to, and why are they going to buy it. And you need to target that to the best of your ability. And if you're selling to multiple audience segments, on different features. Let's say you're selling a car even, and in some case, mom would buy the car, in some case, dad would buy the car, but maybe they're different features, right? Maybe dad prefers the cup holder in the middle, and maybe, mom loves that the car is very safe, or whatever the feature set that each of them is kind of identified. You want to call that out when they're going through the experience of your content. And so I think it's one of the core criteria of classic advertising is segmenting your audience and showing them why to buy your product.
Right. I think one of the other things too that I found with dealing with some of these small businesses is that a lot of times they think they understand their demographic. Like, oh, we're selling this product. It's a cream that women use, and that's just the way it is. But then you kind of dig a little bit more, and you're like, actually, no, some men use it too because it's actually good for psoriasis or whatever the case may be. I think understanding that and helping a client get through that is a really challenging thing sometimes because they're so focused and they've got blinders on, especially small businesses. Like, we built this product, we know it better than anybody. How do you kind of really prove through paid media that maybe you need to spend a little bit of money across different demographics to actually find the one that speaks best to your audience?
Yeah, I'd say actually there's two things. One, even before you spend money, the only person that knows your business better than you do is the people that paid you for the product. So just ask them. I think one of the things I always tell SMBs is that you have a great feedback loop, and they're the people who already purchased your product. Good or bad, it's great information. And then also, to your point, you can spend money testing, right, in very small increments, if other people might like the product. To your point, whether it's, maybe it's a lotion for your skin and it's a women's product that sells to men or whatever it may be, you can start to identify those things with testing. And I think you need to, create an opportunity for yourself to learn as well all the time.
Yeah, I think one of the other things that's a really untapped thing is influencer marketing, and not massive influence, but micro influencers, because they have such a deeper connection with an engaged audience already. Like, how effective is it because you bring up this idea of people that have used your product that can actually kind of almost be ambassadors on your behalf to speak for your product and its effectiveness. Like, how important is it to have a good relationship and a good influencer marketing strategy when it comes to specifically with small and mid-sized businesses, and how they can actually use these influencers as ambassadors and almost testimonials to the effectiveness of their products?
Oh, I think you grow with your core. So I think it's probably one of the smartest marketing tactics you can have in today's ecosystem. When even taking your top 5% of your customers and saying thank you and potentially offering them an opportunity to engage with the brand further, or activating them on Instagram with simple instructions on how to tag the brand and kind of show off their purchase. I think it's amazing. Right. And it's something that you've seen a lot of success with on Instagram with retail brands and makeup brands, especially. But I think if you can build your core as an activist group for your product, it's essential to your growth.
And what do you think are some of the best effective strategies when it comes to retargeting? I think there's a way to retarget an audience, but there's also a way to retarget an audience, but maybe the different message or something that maybe resonates with them a bit differently. Talk a little bit about what the effectiveness of retargeting, how important it is to kind of continue to build maybe your strategies around that audience that's already been engaged with your products historically.
Yeah, I think you have to always remember retargeting context, because I think you can offend people very quickly. I also think you can just remind people of why they potentially interacted with your brand and, re-engage them with a simple value prop. So I think that the biggest thing is to remember to be a human being in how you do retargeting, because I think, you can do more harm than good in a lot of cases. I think the second thing is really understanding why you're retargeting them. So are you retargeting them because they purchased something and you want them to come back? Then understand the cadence of when that might happen depending on the product cycle that you're selling, versus did they not purchase, they left the website, how do you re-engage them respectfully and potentially repurpose why they got there, or even re-engage them with a new offering thinking that might be the other feature that they wanted to talk about. So I do think that respect is the big word in retargeting, to be honest, but an essential tactic to cultivate and continue engagement with potential customers. Because no buying cycle, by the way, no buying cycle is just instantaneously all the time for the most part.
Right. Right. That's something I wanted to talk about too. That's what I was going to leave off. Like when you're actually like looking at the traffic of your website, how important is it to see exactly the behavior of the people that land there? Like tracking like the page they go to, how long they stay on a page, what their engagement is like. Do they put stuff in the basket but then bail? Like how important is that data, and how can you actually learn from that data and maybe refine your approach to actually reaching back out to those people and getting them to convert?
Oh, again, it's one of the best things you can do for yourself, basically, if you're especially an SMB, is look at where you lose people, right? I always call it like you want the most frictionless experience. You want people to come to your website or your storefront or whatever it may be and purchase the products that you're selling as easily as possible and have them have a great experience. And when you think about measuring where people drop off, right? Let's go simple website, analogy. Okay, they land on the landing page. They say, oh, yes, I'm interested in this product. Click on something in a details page, and then everyone drops off. Well, guess what? There's something wrong with your details page. It is not converting into sales, right? And now maybe those people clicked on it by mistake, but the likelihood if you have a high click-through rate from page 1 to page 2, and then everyone drops on page 2, you need to reimagine page 2 so that you're activating more sales with the leads that you cultivated, right? Those potential customers.
Yeah, I think that's something that's super important, is that, there's so much access to data right now. And I think there are certain companies that don't take advantage of those little things that, a lot of people that I've come to, like my website doesn't work. And then you kind of dig in. It's like, actually, you have no video on your landing page. So that's probably why people are very confused as to like what's going on when every other competitor that you're working against has a video on their landing page. So that needs to change. But then you dig even further and you start to see there are very simple things that can be changed. It's not a complete overhaul rebuild of a web page. It's just like you said, redefining some certain elements that actually bring those people back, that actually can start converting them. Because some people get lost on a web page. Some people are like, I don't even know where to go, and then they bail. Yeah,
I mean, imagine as simple as food. I mean, you go to restaurants even today, and their phone number is not on the top of the page. If you do delivery and you don't have your phone number as the first thing that someone sees, and you're not presenting that, you're not creating a frictionless experience, because they want to order now, right? Or having the same thing where you're going to link to whoever you do delivery with online, right? You need to present that when the customer wants it, right? As easily as possible, and meet them with their need, right? Or they go somewhere else.
Yeah, totally. I think one of the other things that's been really, I mentioned at the beginning as we started this conversation, but one thing that's been really interesting for me from creating content is the information you give back to the creatives and the effectiveness of the campaigns and how things are working or not working with specific parts of the campaign. Can you talk to me a little bit about like what that feedback loop is like when you're talking back to a creative or a small business owner about like the effectiveness of it, and how you can work with them collaboratively to change certain elements that actually get the conversions that they're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, what you want to do is set up some A/B tests and potentially really clearly measure, if you changed a message, they're getting twice as many phone calls, or if you changed a message or a promotional opportunity, they're getting twice as many store visits. Or, online retail, as simple as, hey, I sold twice as much product. You want to set up an opportunity, a learning opportunity in order to really educate that business owner that, hey, you're having impact on the business. And you want to, always ask, what do they measure success on, right? Which should be something tied to sales, but even further, how do they measure sales? How are they going to feel confident that you increase that number, that they'll actually give you the credibility and the respect that you actually impacted their business?
Right. What's a good average number when you're a business owner who's trying to run a campaign to see the effectiveness of it? Like, how many different types of messaging or content should you be focused on? Is it as simple as like 1, 2, and we're going to just test those 2? Should you set up like 4 or 5? Like, and at what point does it become too big, where you like spread yourself so thin that you're not seeing, because now you've spread your money across like 15 different campaigns with basically the same call to action? Like what's a good number that you would recommend a small business owner to run for good testing?
It's really hard to answer a question like that, but what I would state is this: like, you want to have just a few different things. So like one of the things is, don't test something where it's like this, 15% off versus 16% off. Like, don't do that, right? Like, have some really significant variations on what you're trying to test out. And then have, 3 to 5, right? Like, have something basic controllable. And again, it depends on the element that you're testing. On landing pages, you probably want to test one versus the other. On creative, maybe you want 3 to 5 call to actions that vary greatly to see, what is going to activate an audience segment, depending on, if you're buying keywords versus, in newsfeed, et cetera. But be simple about it and start to get to make sure that you do have variance. Like, I think one of the things that I always tell people, stay simple and see the difference. Even the difference in messages around delivering people to a website can educate a business owner to say, okay, I understand this now. I'm seeing that more people are going to my website, where now I know that we need to translate those into phone calls. So I tell more, and that's really where you want to start. Super basic, keep it simple, and don't overcomplicate it.
Yeah, because I do think that once you start to show some semblance of effectiveness around a campaign you're running for a client, when they start to get that traction, that's when they kind of understand that switch gets flipped, and you can actually start to run things even more effectively for them, because you can start to whittle down those 1 or 2 that actually like working. I've talked to somebody last week, they're like, oh, we've got 27 different ad campaigns that are running around this same basic CTA. And I was just like, I don't know if that's going to work for something as simplistic as what they were selling. And like you said, they were doing such slight variations on what that, incentivized thing to get them over to the website was. I just don't know. And again, we've only got a couple $1,000s. You're not talking about a $50,000 campaign. You got to talk about like maybe 3,000, 5,000 at most. It's challenging because you're basically spreading that money very, very thin across so many different things that you're not really testing an effective, campaign, in the best way possible. That was my recommendation to them.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking just a few $1,000s, my biggest advice is be very targeted on what you're purchasing and why, right? Yeah. So think about the intent of the customer that you're going after. Think about the message you're delivering. Is that going to be, a very high conversion rate for them to come and purchase your product, whether it's retail, whether it's buying a pizza? Are they relevant to your business, right? Do they need education about the product? Like all of those variables, but like be very targeted. Right. In regard to, if you respect every dollar you spend, is what I always tell people.
Do you think, and this is just a throwaway question, but do you kind of think that in some ways Facebook is really good for brand awareness and Google is maybe better for brand sales, for selling things directly? I just feel like there's much more of a play for longer form content. I was running an ad campaign 2 weeks ago, and it was like, I don't know, probably a 45-second spot. And Facebook was like, oh, we now recommend 3-minute videos because we're seeing so much better traction. Then you start talking about long form videos. I remember 5 years ago, we were back at Vayner. It's like, get things done in 3 seconds because nobody sticks around anymore. Now they want it to be even longer. And I feel like that type of content really kind of plays into the brand, awareness type of space, as opposed to like really hard selling somebody to get them to buy something. And I know there are a lot of sales that are happening on Insta and Facebook in general, but I just see it as becoming much more of like, make a great campaign where you can like target the sale and then also make great content that's more about brand awareness. Maybe put less of paid media behind that, but really build your brand out in a way that's maybe a bit fuller than just trying to go for the hard sell with everything that you make, with all your content that you make.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few things to that. Like one, there's no silver bullet, right? Like I think when it comes to advertising campaigns, you can be successful in a variety of different kind of launch strategies, but again, when you really need to diagnose who you are, right? If you're, first of all, an SMB business and you're in a, let's say restaurant or retail, you need to understand what are the variables going to be success or failure versus your competitive set. Are you a localized business? Are you covering the basics? And then to your point, if you're going to run a campaign, and defining Google, by the way, if they have YouTube, I would run long form content. So I think it depends on the platform. But what I will state is that you have to understand the message you're trying to deliver, and does that fit in the format that you're using, right? If it's a 45-second message, then you need 45 seconds to deliver it, right? If you're a product category leader, right, you need to educate people. If you're pizza at a local restaurant, you need to make sure that everybody in your local delivery radius knows you're there and has a great product, and then have third-party testimonials, whether it's Yelp, whether it's Google Maps, showcasing your customers talking about how great your pizza is, right? And you need to understand how you're going to effectively compete in your space, and that's a unique thing for every business owner depending on what they're running. But you really need to diagnose who you are and what you're trying to achieve with the customer.
Cool. I want to actually show a campaign that we worked on together with Vayner. It's kind of interesting because I do feel like we put this spot out. It was for Budweiser. It was a pretty internally, everybody felt really good about this campaign. And even when we presented to the client, they were stoked. They thought it was fantastic. It was around Budweiser rebranding itself for the entire summer with the America across their label instead of removing the Budweiser label. And when we released the content, it actually performed very, very poorly. And I kind of want to just play it, and then let's talk about it on the back end of it, but from two perspectives. One, what were some of the challenges and things that you guys found like right away that was not working with it? And then two, how did the collaborative effort between the production team and the paid media team and the creative team kind of like really solve a problem and save an ad from being scrapped altogether and kind of redefine it? So let's there you go. So when that ran, I know that within 3 days, we saw that people were dropping out pretty aggressively from that ad. It was mostly run on Facebook, I believe. So tell me a little bit about what you guys found and some of the challenges that we had with that ad when we're running the paid media behind it.
Yeah, you're testing my knowledge here, Jay. This is an oldie but a goodie. So, we ran that at Vayner when I was there. I believe it was Ben Allison and crew. So kudos to the team on the paid media side. I believe what they discovered early on was that compared to typical digestion or benchmark around video, it was very suboptimal, right? And especially people were falling off extremely early in the video. And so that was something that was given feedback to you and the creative team at the time. And really, I believe within 24 hours, I don't want to speak for what it was, but very quickly recut the video based on a recommendation that they needed a different intro. And just to calculate the user based on, at that time, people's digestion rates and habits and behaviors. And then I think the video became one of the best performers on Facebook for them at that year for Anheuser-Busch. So it was a pretty exciting partnership around, I think, what you want to see in media and creative, and exciting stuff.
Yeah, and I think the biggest challenge was that in people's feeds, which is where it was traditionally being housed and people watching it on, people see that Budweiser can and immediately they're flicking through because they know it's an ad for Budweiser. And most people, they don't want to be served up ads. But if you don't show that can at the beginning and you get into the actual, bid itself, the animation kind of kept people engaged, kept people watching through to the very end. So I think the conversion went something like, less than 5% to probably something like over 90% once we actually recut it. And I think one of the things that was really interesting for that moment for me was our ability to change and pivot based on the data we're getting back. And I don't think you see that in a lot of places, even today, where you're having that collaborative effort on the back end where we see something not working and we go back in and creatively try to solve the problem and get it back done in a very, very fast turnaround space.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that it again. Oh. Sorry, I got a phone call. It's like, yeah, I think the biggest thing that I was always in love with a lot of the digital platforms is just the response that you get and how you can pivot. And so whether it's, to your point, in this case, content that needed to be adjusted to captivate more of an audience based on their behavior on that platform, right? So understanding context and how you advertise, even as simply as, understanding landing pages on the queries, right? So I think that you have to have an appreciation for, again, who that customer is and what they're doing and how you're injecting into that moment.
So I want to kind of, before we wrap things up, I really want to talk about where we currently are, but I want to add one more thing that I think is super relevant because I talked to a lot of people about, either, I get on phones with people and they start talking about, I bring up paid media and in effect is like, oh, it never works. It doesn't work for me. Like I've hired teams, doesn't work. I feel one of the things that when I start to dig a little bit is because a lot of the people that they've either agencies or whomever they may have worked with in the past, they're very non-transparent with what they're doing with these brands' money and these businesses' money. How have you felt that transparency from a paid media perspective is not only important when dealing with the client, like you mentioned, a partner that a lot of these companies probably are looking for, but I think it's also necessary. Like, I don't know a world that we live in where you aren't transparent with your client / partner, and you can have an effective relationship and winning campaign at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I think for anybody who's a business owner that doesn't feel educated in the space, like the number one thing you should do is hopefully find someone you trust that has had success and find out who they're working with, right? Like really go through the value chain that you respect, and see if you can find someone at least educated to give you advice to not get ripped off. I think a lot of what you see, unfortunately, in the industry is a varying level of education, which in some cases people do abuse and take advantage of. And so you want to make sure that if you're giving anybody money and you're paying them for a service, that you either have the capability to measure their success or feel confident in the measures that you're going to put in place to be successful and have a good relationship, and hopefully pick a partner that's, upstanding and wants to do right by you. But unfortunately, some people either don't know or don't care. And so you want to make sure you're protected. And I definitely think it's important to make sure that I would stress that anybody, if you don't feel comfortable, there's something probably wrong.
Yeah. What do you think are some of the benefits that paid media have had on small and mid-sized businesses over the past 4 or 5 years? I mean, you look traditionally when you're looking for where to place advertising or to get your brand or business known, you look at TV, right? And so you just can't compete at those prices, right? So you're paying for ad time around a TV program that's hundreds of thousands of dollars sometimes. Now you've got this thing called Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, and the price of entry is much, much lower to get your message out there. Granted, if you get the more money you have, the more people you're going to reach. But if you know your audience really well, you can effectively reach them with relatively small amounts of paid media. Can you kind of tell me like how these past 4 or 5 years have kind of redefined advertising, how small and mid-sized businesses can actually compete with bigger and larger brands, and maybe what the future holds for some of these brands?
Yeah, I mean, I think, in the last 4 to 5 years, you've seen, honestly, an establishment of digital, right? Classically, described as digital inventory and media, be equal with the traditional channels of television and even surpass. So I think that, there's no, again, silver bullet in regards to television as the only pure medium to build brands any more than, it still works, right? But you have to have an understanding of, to your point, entry points on television are extremely high, maybe not accessible for some SMBs, but Google and Facebook have been, the life of small and medium businesses for the last 4 to 5 years and probably will continue because of their, low entry points, because of their opportunity from a targeting perspective to really hone in on who you want, and their plethora of advertising products that fundamentally work. It's just true.
Yeah. So we got one comment that just kind of came in, and it kind of will kind of set up how we can wrap this up with currently where we are in the market space. So somebody just asks like what you think the future of paid media is based on the times that we're currently in. And they're a small business owner, but they also recognize that now might be a time for them to get deeply involved with Facebook advertising because cost and entry point is very low. Like where do you think the future goes from here? Do we continue to see these prices, or do things go down? And how do I effectively use the platform to market and to start to get my brand out there?
Yeah, so a couple of things. I think obviously the world is a very sad place, and everyone needs to be respectful, both Corona and what's going on in the African American community. And so, first of all, make sure that you're a human being first. I just want to state that. If we were to put that aside and just look at the classic business opportunity from an auction place, you always want to take advantage of the low-hanging fruit or opportunity, right? So Facebook for the last 4 or 5 years ago, when you think about the Dollar Shave Clubs of the world, they rode a very nice wave of a new platform with low CPMs, and combined that with a great advertising campaign and a very easy kind of purchase cycle, and they became very successful and this classic story that most people talk about SMB to monster win. So you want to always keep that in mind. I think, again, I want to state like right now in the world is a very tough time. And so you want to make sure that you're being extremely respectful. But if you're just looking auction place dynamics of ebb and flow of where opportunistic things come up. I talked about it earlier with TikTok. I do believe if you can inject yourself effectively on TikTok with a great piece of creative and tie that to simple, targeting elements, you can be very successful for an SMB brand. And I'll use, again, pizza. I think college students would really embrace a brand that engaged them on TikTok about how great their pizza was compared to, potentially one of the classic, pizza chains. So you really just need to understand kind of the opportunity that you're trying to take advantage of and make sure that you're, deploying, again, great creative, great targeting, and all the elements you need for a successful campaign.
Can we talk a little bit about, and I don't want you to mention business names or brands directly, but some of the challenges that you faced with kind of managing some of your clients through these times and what advice you're giving them? I understand, like, just 3 days ago, we were in a different world than we are today, and who knows what tomorrow will bring. But maybe right at the beginnings, when we start to have the lockdown and advertisers really trying to have to reshift and change their whole marketing strategy. I mean, I've spoken with some massive brands who had strategies kind of lined up through the fall, through the spring and summer months that literally had to pull the plug on everything, and spent millions and millions of dollars that they lost in campaigns and commercials they made. What have you said to some of your brands at the beginning when all this happened, and how have you coached them? And what advice are you giving them to get them through this time?
Yeah, I think it depends on who you are. I mean, we deal with some large scale brands, and then also I have some SMBs that I'm tied to. So I think it really depends on who you are. And I always tell people to just be authentic to your brand and who you are as a person. And if you feel like you should put a message out during this time, then you should do that. And that depends on, again, if you're a large scale, CPG company that everybody loves and respects, let's say, or you're a bank or whoever you may be. And again, I haven't, I'm not using anyone specifically. They have an obligation just on how many people they employ, right? So they're going to come out with messages. And so you just want to make sure that you tell anybody, this is what I always tell people, just be authentic to who you are as a brand and what you're doing. And then I think the only other thing I preach right now is respect, just as a human being, and what's going on in the world. And it's really difficult for a lot of people. And it's a very sad place, and you should show a lot of respect and just be a human being first.
Yeah, and that sometimes can get lost when you're looking at data. I mean, sometimes people see data and they really forget the humanity behind the data. And I think that's something that you have to work collaboratively with a partner in a brand or business partner to try to really understand that there's a human being behind that data, and that data can sometimes be misleading when you're just looking at conversion rates and things like that. So I think that's super important advice moving forward. Yeah,
and you never want to take advantage of anybody, right? Especially in today's times. And so you want to make sure that you're being extremely respectful and appreciative.
Yeah, totally. Well, that's about it, Jeff. I think everything's been fantastic. Again, I knew that having you on would be like super educational and super helpful with some of the people that I've been working with and some people that I've been tuning in, for the past 3 weeks. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for coming on. Any other last words or any other piece of advice you want to give as we have a parting moment here?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think for any business owner, if you're considering paid media, just make sure that you either educate yourself or find someone that you trust that is educated. It's very easy to waste money, even if it's a few $1,000s. And so make sure that you understand what you're doing, what you're investing in, and you have all the pieces together to be successful.
Cool. Good advice. Thank you again, Jeff. Appreciate it. Stay safe.
Appreciate it.
Talk again real soon. Take care.